Why am I always right? Today I'm talking about perception and communication. Perception is the way we look, understand and interpret our world. Everyone's perception is unique and it's coloured by many things. Environmental factors such as where we're born, our culture, religion, our friends and schooling. Innate personality type, temperament and our love languages also impact how we view the world. It's these personality factors that I'll be discussing in upcoming podcasts. But today we need to understand why we're not always right, even though we usually think we are. I do, don't you? Welcome to Personalities, Parenting and Partners. It's the podcast that connects you with the ones you care about the most. I'm Kate Mason. I teach people how to understand their innate personalities and how to understand the personalities of others in order to create harmony in workplaces and life. I'm here today to talk about our unique personality communication and our perception of our world and the people in it. Real communication is not happening right now at this time, as we all have more friends than we've ever had before, but people are the loneliest that they've ever been. People's understanding of others is also at an all-time low. It's important that our communication skills are functioning at their highest level. Now, in order to understand this, let's look at how we communicate. There are 3 elements to communication: body language, voice tone, words. Remembering that if these are people's communication tools, today's world is in a very different place. People are currently unable to connect physically or use their body language effectively. Either we're unable to see people, or if we can, we see each other via social media, and body language can be harder to read. We are also unable to touch another human being. When communicating face-to-face, our facial expression is often missing, hidden behind a mask. Or we choose to use other types of communication, where no human form of communication takes place other than written words. We use social media, texts, Insta, emails to converse with others rather than speaking. Therefore, tonality and the ability to gauge a person's mood or feeling through verbal cues is lost. Do you have any idea what percentages of these different areas impact our communication with others? Let me tell you. Body language is 55% of our communication. Voice tone, 38%. And words, 7%. Wow. So what do you think is the most common form of communication we use today? Yes, it's words. Think of how often you text or email or go on Insta and send a message. When we just use words, we cut out 93% of the elements of interactive communication. And that's a lot of missing information and interaction between people. How many of you have made mistakes when texting or upset people with the way they interpret your text? Remember, there's no emotion in written words apart from those you add in with emojis. So what does this mean for us as a society when we're no longer able to see people's body language to understand what we're saying and how we're saying affects them? We have no physical cues for seeing a whole range of emotions: sadness, anger, happiness. My first memory of differences in perception was when I was 14 years old. My brothers, my mother and I were at the airport farewelling my mum's mother, who had come over from England and stayed with us for 6 weeks. Mum had not seen her for many years, and it was very unlikely she'd be seeing her again in the near future. As the plane took off, we all waved at the small window we thought she was seated in, and my mum was sobbing. Taller than her, I reached out and hugged her. Putting my head on her head, I said, "Don't worry, Mum. You'll get to see her again one day." She sobbed even harder, and she lifted her head up and she looked at me, and she said, "I'm so glad to see her go." Our tears turned into laughter when we realised how mistaken I'd been about the reason for them. I was thinking my mum was heartbroken, but she was ecstatic that her mother had gone. What a different perception I had. If we hadn't spoken about it, I would never have known. Think of this situation. There was no lack of human contact, verbal language or listening skills, and my perception of my mother's tears was totally wrong. So what chance do we have with the least important element of communication, words, being the most widely used in today's society? Now let's look at voice tone. Without voice tone, we're unable to detect the emotions that might take place in a verbal conversation with someone. How do we learn to cope with someone's anger, sadness, distress, annoyance, or happiness when we don't know how it sounds or how to relate to it? People's perception is usually different to ours. My husband Paul is a kind man, but he has an impatient voice tone, very short and to the point when he speaks. Mind you, he thinks he sounds fine. For many years he did the banking for our business, and he used to go to his favourite bank teller to deposit the money. It wasn't until many years later that this person confessed to him, "When I first met you, I thought you were rude and arrogant. However, now I know you, I realise what a lovely man you are." So even with all the communication elements in play, it took some time of personal face-to-face interaction to build a positive relationship over the negativity of voice tone. Has this ever happened to you? Misunderstandings due to voice tone? With 93% of our interaction reduced to 7%, what does this create in our written words with our family, friends and work colleagues? What is it doing to our communication and our children's communication? How is it destroying our children's social skills and the development of the ability to get along with each other? The current trend of words as our major communication tool is seriously impacting people's mental health and resilience. People need to see and hear people. Lack of perception where another person's coming from creates so many different reactions to one situation. When Cass was in her late teens, she came into the kitchen in a bad mood. "What's wrong?" I said. "I'm having a fight with my boyfriend," was her response. I asked her what she was saying to him. "I'm not talking to him. I'm texting him," she said. I looked at her incredulously. "You have to be kidding me. How can you fight via text? You don't know how angry people are when you can't see their faces or hear their voices." She just looked at me and walked out. She came back in an hour later, smiling and happy, and said they'd made up. I just shook my head. What will happen when these young people move in together and have a verbal fight using angry tones and body language? They won't be able to shut down the message. They can't put that person on silent or away in their room. So how hard is it going to be for that generation growing up into adulthood? Remember, there's no emotion in written words apart from those you add in emojis. There's no helpful hint for us to read how people are feeling about either the conversation you've just sent or how they felt before you wrote it. These days, people don't have the knowledge of how to handle other people's physical and vocal emotions. They often haven't witnessed them in their daily lives. Parents also avoid this physical and verbal confrontation with their children by pacifying their children's emotions, and very often their own, handing their child a piece of electronic equipment just to keep them quiet. We were breakfasting in a hotel a couple of years ago when we observed a 5-year-old child playing a game on an iPad, so loudly that it disturbed all around him. While he was watching the screen, absorbed in his game, his mother spoon-fed him his meal, as she too stared at her mobile phone, texting a message to someone. We were blown away. What hope did that child have to handle anything life was going to throw at him? Where were the social skills being taught, such as politely eating in public, the need to sit still without electronic distraction, how to chat socially while out, and finally, learning the skill of actually feeding himself? Where was the talking, the facial expressions, the emotion? Where were any elements of communication? So what are we not teaching our children? Many parents are not teaching their children that emotions are natural and ever-flowing. These children are not given the skills of negotiation, disciplining their own emotions, accepting that it's okay to be angry, sad, impatient, annoyed, or happy. They do not know or understand the concept of waiting for their own turn. Therefore, their perception of the world is less resilient, more self-absorbed. They are unable to self-regulate and discipline their own emotions. So what does this create? A society of anxious, emotionally underdeveloped people. So how can we fix this? As we go along, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you to think about what your answer might be. Because my point is we're actually surrounded by people. Although, as you're aware, not physically as closely as pre-COVID times. So, how well do you understand yourself? Think about it. How do you understand how you think, your beliefs, your values, and how you feel about yourself? And then how well do you understand the people that you're with? We work, live, and play with people, but most of the time we actually don't get them. Who, listening here, has studied anything to understand the dynamics of people? Do we do it at school or at uni? It's actually very rare that we study people skills, but being with people is the most likely thing that's going to happen in your day. So today, we're looking at how other people's view of the world is different to us, and how easy it is to misunderstand and misinterpret people's actions and conversations, even when we're utilizing all of the communication elements. My daughter was waiting for a ferry after a weekend away with a group of about 10 friends on a small island that's about 50 minutes ferry ride from the mainland of South Australia. She texted me saying that the seas were very rough and she gets seasick, so she was a bit nervous. About 10 minutes later, she sent me a text saying, "It's so windy, going to be shutting it." I started to stress. Paul and I began to discuss what accommodations were available on the island, as it was 3:30 p.m, and it was the last ferry, and there were 3 of them that needed to find accommodation. I was just about to contact another of her friend's parents when I texted her again, asking what she was going to do about it. "About what?" she responded. "The ferry," I said. "You said they were shutting it." She sent back a text with a laughing emoji. "I meant I was shitting it," she said. "You know how I hate boats." 1 letter. You, not an I, had changed my whole perception of what was happening. My reactions and thoughts were totally different to hers. I was ready to find her a place to stay in, and she was just scared of the ferry ride. Ah, the joys of the written message. It was a public holiday, and my husband suggested a walk on the beach. I agreed, and as we organised ourselves, our son Jack asked if he could accompany us. Knowing full well he was after a coffee and perhaps some breakfast, we agreed. We do love a bit of bonding over a mealtime. As we started walking, Jack and I realised that Paul wasn't with us. We looked behind, and there he was, dawdling along the water's edge. We walked back to him and asked what was wrong. He said, "Well, when I said a walk with your mum, I was thinking that we'd take it easy, hold hands, and walk along the water, looking over at the horizon." I looked at him and rolled my eyes. I said, "You know me. If I'm going for a walk, it's for exercise, and it's fast." We agreed that Jack and I would meet him in half an hour at the coffee shop. As he proceeded to amble down the beach, Jack and I kept walking fast. And then Jack turned to me and said, "Let's run." I looked at him and said, "You've got to be kidding me. I'm too old to run." He replied, "But when I said I was going for a walk, I was thinking a slow jog." So off he ran down the beach. When we finally all reassembled for coffee, I said to them both, next time we all want to walk, we need to discuss what kind of walk we were talking about, as our different perceptions of that one word walk meant totally different things to all of us. If 3 people can misconstrue one word, what does that mean for every conversation we have with people? And that was using our voices and our body language. My husband's a supervisor at our swim school. His job is to talk to parents, work with children to improve their swimming. He loves it, and he's an expert in this area. I was working on reception one day when a gentleman approached me frowning and in a very angry tone asked me who was the man at the end of the pool. I looked up and saw it was Paul. I didn't bother mentioning he was my husband. I asked him why he needed to know. He said he was angry because Paul had humiliated and upset his child by removing him from his class, making him swim in another lane, and then putting him back down into a class that was below his skill level. I smiled at him, asked him to wait, and went to Paul. I said to him, I need you to smile right now, because that gentleman down there is annoyed. I told him what that father had told me, and I instructed him to keep that smile on his face, as he could see Paul's facial expression. Paul explained, through gritted teeth and a forced smile, how the child's breaststroke kick needed fixing. So he'd given him 15 minutes of individual time, fixing it and then putting him in the class below because they were doing breaststroke and he thought it was a good chance for him to keep practicing. I told him what the father in the foyer and his child's perception of Paul's good-hearted intentions were. Through gritted teeth he muttered, You have to be kidding me. I said, Did you talk to either of them? No, I didn't think I'd have to. Yes, I know, I said. Now get out there and communicate verbally rather than just with actions about what you were doing. Which he did, and everyone left happy. However, we could have lost very valuable clients if this problem hadn't been resolved. Now, most elements of communication were used in this scenario, but failure to verbally tell both father and son what he was doing caused a huge difference in perception of what was taking place. Paul thought he was doing them a huge favour, and they felt mistreated and angry. Phew! Think about Paul's swimming story. All elements of communication still there, and so many different perceptions of that situation were made. In our heads, we always think we're right, but sadly we're not. As you can see, every conversation you have, no matter how many elements of communication are involved, your actions and words can be perceived differently. So what does that mean for all of us as communicators, and how can we improve our connection and understanding of people? So here are my 3 takeaways on perception. Number 1, never assume that others think the way you think. Number 2, remember that you're not always right, even though we like to think so. We are all different, and there is no right or wrong. Number 3, always check in with people on how they've understood what you've been talking about, particularly if you're in the fortunate position of being able to see their body language. For example, do they look uncomfortable, happy, sad? Being able to listen to their voice tone. Is it grumpy, annoyed, happy, and understanding of their words? Get them to replay their thoughts about your conversation and check that your message is getting across. I know everyone's going to have a slightly different take on what I've spoken about today, and hopefully most of it's good. I hope that you'll be able to use your newfound knowledge of perception in both your workplace and home. Remember, no one sees the world exactly like you. For better communication, you need to understand their perspective too. Thank you for listening to Personalities, Parenting and Partners. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could leave a rating and a review that helps others learn about this podcast. If you have an episode idea, please send a note to thepersonalitycoach@gmail.com. Thanks to our producers at Podcasts That Pop. Would you do us a favour and recommend this podcast to one friend? Thanks, and see you next time.